So today's video is going to be short, but I just wanted to kind of go over something that I also don't really see being talked about that I had to figure out on my own, which is how exactly I am handicapped as a person after being groomed. And handicapped is really the only word that I know to use for what happens my brain, how my brain has been weakened and changed and affected from the rewiring that went on with a predator, specifically when I was 13 to 16 years old. When I met a pedophile online and he groomed me for that long. But, after that, I continued to be involved in multiple other abusive, predatory, exploitive situations, call them whatever you want to, but all very similar to what that man put me through for 3 years. And I couldn't figure out why these people continued to find me in a sense, even though I was also, feeling attracted to them and we almost found each other in a way. But I couldn't figure out why this was such a pattern to my life. And part of it, I think, looking back now, is this handicap that I'm going to talk about. How, your brain has been changed. You were taught and indoctrinated to behave a certain way by an abuser, by a predator, for however long you were involved with them. They changed you. They taught you to behave in a way that was more convenient and acceptable to them and what they wanted to exploit you for. How we naturally behave when they first meet us, that doesn't work for them because that's us being independent and all these other things. They have to change us. They have to rewire us so that we behave in a way that works better for them and what they're wanting. So based on that, what that looks like is the fact that we are left with what I would call tells. These people, whether advertently or inadvertently, they're casing us. We're all casing each other in a sense. We're all assessing each other, reading each other, gathering information from each other. But predators are especially good at this. And to give you an example of what casing looks like, I was a secretary for probation officers at one point, and I went to a conference or whatever for probation officers and correctional officers. And at this meeting, they told the correctional officers explicitly that when they went into work in the prisons, they always needed to iron their clothes. Always. And this wasn't a professional thing, this was a safety thing. And it was a safety thing because if they went in with wrinkly clothes, the prisoners would know that they were tired. And if they knew that they were tired, they would know that they were more vulnerable and more easily to exploit. Easier to exploit. And so that's just an example of what casing is. Casing is looking at a person's information, whether it's how they dress. There's lots of different tells that you can have as a person, and I will make a video about that at some point. But either way, part of the tells are our behaviors. And if you've been groomed and abused or whatever, rewired to act in a more submissive way for a predator or an abuser, even after you get out of that situation, you are left with those behaviors. If you learned that over the course of a significant amount of months or a significant amount of years, that doesn't just end when you end the relationship. You are left with those behaviors. It almost makes sense that after you've been in a car crash or something that, has affected your body, some kind of accident of some kind, the muscles are damaged and weakened. And a lot of people after some kind of significant accident have to go to physical therapy to re-strengthen those muscles, right? After you've been involved with a predator or an abuser who has rewired your brain and groomed and brainwashed you and broken you down, you've been broken down. You have to re-strengthen those muscles. And so these are just some of the muscles that I see that have been weakened in me by my brainwashing and grooming that I've been working on rewiring and changing because I don't want to act this way anymore. These are some of the tells that I have that are helping people, charming, beautiful storytellers, continue to find me. And I don't want that to be the case. One of the first things is oversharing. So I think I was always maybe bad at oversharing, but my predator really encouraged me to overshare, because the more information he could get out of me early on in that love bombing stage, the more he knew how to exploit me, manipulate me, etc. And I see that with a lot of these guys, where in the beginning stages, they really want you to overshare as much as possible. A lot of times while giving either very little about themselves or making up stories that aren't even true. So you feel like you're connecting with them, but you actually aren't. But either way, they encourage that oversharing. And that is a habit that I still have today that I had to learn how to undo. I had to learn how to become a more private person. I had to learn that I'm not obligated to give someone my entire life story within the first 24 hours of meeting them. And that sounds laughable, but I actually had to have someone explain to me that I wasn't supposed to do that, because I thought that's what dating was. I thought dating was literally taking my entire heart out of my chest, being as honest as possible without having assessed this person and knowing if they're even safe or not, and literally just telling them everything about me without a filter. I mean, it was incredibly unsafe. And so oversharing is one handicap that I've had to work on. I'm also more prone to self-neglect. I'm more prone to taking care of others, prioritizing others more than myself. A lot of these symptoms you'll see in books on codependency, but aside from labels, these are just things that I see in general as well. Even if you're not, let's say, codependent, these are things that I also just see in survivors. So yeah, I'm more prone to self-neglect. For example, I might not eat all day because I'm so busy helping someone else. If I'm really upset about something in a relationship and the other person becomes upset, I'll disregard my own feelings to try to make them feel better, things like that. There's lots of different ways that self-neglect occurs, but I've had to learn to work on prioritizing myself. Even if that makes the person that I'm involved with mad and upset because they want to be the priority, they want me to be the caregiver, and them the child that I am taking care of in a sense. And that's not an explicit thought in their head, but that is essentially what's going on, is a child wanting the caregiver to give. And I've had to learn how to not do that, how to actually caregive to myself. Kind of tied to that is the fact that I would feel a lot of guilt for being upset about anything, having any kind of negative emotion about anything. In my grooming when I was a young teenager, this was a very common dynamic with my predator over the course of the 3 years that we talked, was that, and this is, I think, very common in any abusive relationship, it's okay if they get upset, but if you get upset, you're ruining their day and you're pissing all over their, parade. Or you're just wrong, or you're just crazy, or you're over emotional, whatever word they want to use, you shouldn't be having the feelings that you're having. And so I carried a lot of guilt and a lot of shame with me, and I would bottle a lot of my emotions, even in my friendships, because it was so deep-seated, this belief that all of the feelings that I had, whatever they were, if they weren't happiness and joy, they were probably wrong. I didn't know how to trust my own feelings, accept my own feelings, exist with my own feelings, because I had that guilt and shame, and that's a handicap. That was a handicap for me. Another thing I've had to work on that's been kind of discouraging, but I am slowly getting better at it, is my freezing mentality, or my fawning mentality that I've talked about in other videos. I think that was one of the most weakened muscles in my brain, is this knee-jerk reaction to freeze and to fawn and to just cater to the upset person in front of me, instead of being able to calm my brain down and really assess what's going on in the moment, not 2 days later, which is really how it used to be. It used to be that I would freeze, I would fawn, I would just cater to them, give them whatever, do whatever. And then after it was all over, then really assess what they said to me, what happened, and feel very frustrated and discouraged. And this still is hard for me today sometimes. I mean, there will be times where a guy that, in a parking lot or something will ask for my phone number, something so simple. And I will feel this fear that something bad is going to happen if I don't do it. And it's a lightning bolt reaction. It's not like a whole 5 minutes of me feeling fear and terror. It's not. It takes 2 seconds for me to feel that and give them my phone number. It's so fast. And to slow that down is so hard. because it takes practice. And I've had to learn that every time a man hits on me now, it's an opportunity to rewire my brain. That's really how I've had to learn to think about it, because most guys are gross, so it doesn't matter anyway. I need to learn how to reject all of them, right? Or something, I don't know. But yeah, this freezing and fawning mentality is a huge handicap. And when I'm describing all of these things, you have to understand that these all can be very apparent on a first date, very apparent in a first conversation. I mean, these are like micro behaviors that you might think take a while to show up, but you really might have no idea how much all of this is showing in the way that you speak, the way that you act, the way that you converse with someone. And all a predator has to do, or a predatory person has to do, is talk to you for 30 minutes and gather a lot of this information through the tiny things that you are saying about yourself, the way that maybe you apologize too much. That was another handicap I had. Another thing I had to undo, which was a huge vulnerability, a huge tell that I had, and a huge handicap, was believing that my worth was tied to my body. And what that looked like was in simple conversations with men. I would brag about how sexually promiscuous I was. I would make a lot of sexual jokes to try to be cool and try to fit in with the boys. I would dress in a certain way sometimes that maybe was a tell that I was available. And I'm not shaming how anyone dresses, period. But I had to become aware of the fact that I am more vulnerable as a person. I'm more prone to attracting predators. And I actually did make the personal decision just for myself to start dressing in a different way, because I found that my clothing was telling a story. And I was just so tired of attracting really toxic people who were just looking to use me for my body. I needed a break from that for a second to re-strengthen my muscles. And so I started dressing in a different way, almost to protect myself for a while, to tell more of a story of being unavailable with my clothing. But all of that combined together was me tying my worth to my body and wanting to seem sexually available, because I thought that was the only way to truly attract a man, was with my body, because I really didn't believe that my personality, A, had any value, and B, I thought I was crazy, right? I thought that all of the emotions I had were wrong. So if this is all broken and jacked up and I'm so crazy mentally, then all I have to offer is my body. That's the only thing left. And so again, working on finding value in myself and understanding that I'm not this broken, crazy person who's just lucky to find someone who tolerates her, made me not feel so reliant on my body as well, but it also just really honing in and hammering down on myself that I am not my body. My worth is not tied to my body. I am a person first and foremost. I wasn't born as someone's daughter destined to be a porn star. And I've said that in other videos, but that is something I really had to realize for myself. And that was a handicap. That was a vulnerability. That was something that exploitive predatory men used against me in a lot of ways in these relationships. Even if it was just dating a sex addict who bullied me all the time, that I wasn't providing sex enough, whatever that was. Maybe it was me getting in situations where I've tied my worth to my body. Now they're asking for sex, and I have a freezing and fawning mentality. So how do you think that's going to go? You think I'm not going to give them sex? I'm going to give them sex. And so that resulted in me also just having a lot of sex that I didn't want to have. Did those people rape me? No. I was handicapped, and I got myself in situations where I was not built to handle those. I didn't have the strength to handle those situations appropriately. And I was playing outside of my realm with the big boys and the big dogs when I was really vulnerable and handicapped. And so that also fits into having very weak boundaries. That is a huge handicap. Oh my gosh, you want to talk about being a vulnerable person? If you don't have a fence to protect yourself, anybody's going to walk into that yard. And that's really scary. So having weak boundaries was a huge one. And the last one that I really had to work on, which I've already kind of touched on, but I just want to go into more specifically, was trusting my spirit and having my own opinions about things. That was huge. I don't know if people understand how much survivors struggle with this, struggle with having their own opinions about things. When you've been with an abuser for so long, at least for me, I was indoctrinated and broken down to where only their opinion of things really mattered. They had the most credibility. My own opinions and my own feelings had no credibility because I assumed I was crazy. I assumed that everything that I felt inside was essentially wrong. And I had no way of assessing whether what I felt was right or not. I mean, I was just in this fog all the time. And it was really important for me when I finally stopped dating people, because you can't heal while you're continually involved with predators and predatory exploitive people and abusive people. And pretty much every time I dated, this was what I was stumbling onto. And so when I finally took the time to be single for a few years, because the stuff doesn't form over the course of a few months, at least for me, I had years of experiences like this. So it makes sense that it would take years to undo this. When I was finally alone and by myself, it was so weird, but the only way I know how to describe it is that it was like emerging out of a cage where there was all this greenery and grass in front of me, and I had the ability to have whatever opinion I wanted to have about myself, about other people, about life, about relationships. I mean, I had been in back-to-back relationships with men. I had never been just by myself before. And I cannot explain to you how weird that experience actually was, to look up and there was no man beside me to dictate and tell me how to feel about things. And I was like, my God, I get to decide. I get to decide what I want to think. And it was amazing and it was liberating, but it was also very scary and it was very overwhelming. And because this shows the handicap, truly, the handicapness of myself, the brokenness, the vulnerability. For so long after that, I had to rely on my friends and on my family. I turned to them next to ask, what opinions should I have? What should I think about these things? Because I didn't know how to rely on myself. That muscle was so weakened and so broken. And that is why I am so appreciative of the trusted people in my life. And I want to say thank you to them 1,000 times over, because they were with me on that journey of healing. They walked beside me while I learned how to have the courage and the confidence and the self-love enough to have my own opinions for myself. And I think that is probably one of the most beautiful experiences I've had thus far as a person, staying single and not being in relationships for a while. I have a whole field of opportunity in front of me. There is no cage, and I can dance and I can laugh however I want to, and no one can tell me how to behave otherwise.